Hi, Level 1 students. This is Darrin Kerr with a quick video to give you some final tips as we approach the May 2025 Level 1 exam window. That window is about to open up in the next few days. So I think it's important for us to go through and kind of talk about some of the things that you could do over this final week and the final couple of days before the exam, as well as what to expect on test day. So in terms of what to do over this final week or so, maybe one more mock exam, two at the most, but I would say probably just one is enough. And that's if you still have a few days until your exam. If your exam is just a couple of days from now, I wouldn't suggest doing any more mock exams. But if you do have approximately 5 to 7 days before, maybe you could try one more mock, allowing you to do the thorough review of the mock exam and really work through the weaknesses in that particular exam, as well as the ones that you have done up until this point. But over that final week, again, hopefully you've already taken several mock exams, so it's not something that you need to be doing a lot of anyway right now. We would have suggested that you do a mock exam per week for the final 6 weeks or so before your actual test. And if that is in fact what you've done, then hopefully you've done 5 or 6 mock exams already. So probably wouldn't even need to do another mock in the final week if you've done that many. But if you feel like you need to do one more, then go for it, but do it as soon as possible so that you have the opportunity to go back and review it thoroughly and to do a little bit more practice with the Q banks as you understand a little bit more about the questions that you got incorrect. So the way to really work through mock exams is, as you go through and grade yourself, note each LOS in which a question was derived, from which a question was derived, and also note obviously the ones that you got incorrect, even the ones that you got correct that maybe you were a bit unsure of, that you kind of got lucky on and were able to guess or were able to, through a process of elimination, figure out the correct answer. You might not get the same style of question that might be testing something similar on the actual exam. So you're going to want to make sure that you have a deeper understanding of that material when you get to the actual. So even for questions that you got correct on the mock exams, you still want to note the ones that are giving you a little bit of trouble conceptually. So you can go back and review them and practice a little bit around those questions. And when we say practice a little bit around those questions, note the LOS that the question was derived from, and then go into the Q bank. The Meldrum Q bank will allow you to go in and formulate quizzes based not just on a reading, but on an LOS within a reading. So you can do all the questions related to an LOS. And then the CFA ecosystem has its own Q bank that you should be using also for your practice. And there you can do further questions around the reading and the LOSs that are giving you trouble. So that's really how we would approach these final few days, and that, as it's labeled up here, final week. Do not try to take a mock exam every day. One of the main mistakes that students make in the Level 1 exam is waiting too long to do the mock exams. And what can happen sometimes is that students will start to try to do the mock exams with just a few days before the actual. And because they haven't done enough, they'll try to do one every day or even every other day. And the problem with that, you don't have time to actually improve. You need a lot of time, probably twice as long as the actual length of time it took to do the mock, to go back through the mock, note what you got incorrect, really study what that question was asking, and then go and do similar questions from the Q bank, or even going back into the curriculum book and finding examples that were used and that could basically be formulated into a style of question that might appear on the CFA. So you need that time to do that review. So doing a mock every day or even every other day is probably not the best use of time over this final week. Hopefully you've done enough. If you haven't, then you could maybe go through and kind of walk through questions from mock exams so that you're at least seeing that style of question as you approach the actual test over these final few days. The other thing that we would suggest for you all over this final week, and we would have hoped that you were already doing this, but certainly here in this final week, we want you to be doing some daily ethics practice. We want you to be practicing a little bit of ethics every day. The best way to practice ethics at this late stage is to do questions. So there are a lot of questions available in the Q banks. Here for ethics, we highly encourage you all to do all of the questions that the CFA Institute has available. Ethics is a very different type of topic compared to the other topics that are tested on the exam. So you're going to want to make sure that when you study ethics, you're studying it directly from the source. And the best way to improve is to do a lot of practice with questions that are similar to the ones that you would actually see on the exam. Ethics does not ask you to memorize Standard 1, Part A or Part B and what that actually is. It's all about the application of those standards. So in order to be able to practice that, you need to see questions that apply those standards. And if you do QBank questions or if you do mock exam questions focused on ethics, you'll see that. You'll see that in action. If you go and take a look, you'll be able to do those practical examples through question work, and will better understand, let's say for an example, what independence and objectivity actually means as it relates to an analyst's behavior, or how, let's say, a financial advisor would go about the process of choosing a brokerage firm to place trades on behalf of clients. So daily ethics practice for us at this stage would mean doing 10 questions a day over 20 or 30 minutes at the start of your day to kind of get through more and more questions as you approach actual exam day, and then move on to your plan for the remaining topic areas for that day. All right, now, what about over the final 1 or 2 days? Over the final 1 to 2 days before your actual exam, we encourage you all to do a light review of all of the current curriculum topics. So this would be the opportunity to go back and review some notes, to go back and review your formula sheet or sheets, to go back and take a look at maybe some of those questions that had given you trouble and the notes or the calculations that you were using to be able to kind of work through and better understand those troubling questions. It's a chance to do one last look at ethics. Remember, it's the most heavily weighted topic in the CFA Level 1 exam, so you're going to need to do well on it, and you want to have it very fresh in your minds. So yet again, it's an opportunity to go back and take another look. One of the parts of the Level 1 ethics curriculum would be that introduction to GIPS, those global investment performance standards. So maybe over this final 1 or 2 days, you can review the GIPS requirements and recommendations that would likely be tested at that introductory level. Again, through question practice, you'll be able to go and see a lot of what they'll likely be testing you on in terms of GIPS material. Here we say, do not take a mock exam with only 1 or 2 days to go. Hopefully, like we said earlier, done plenty of those already. This is not the time to jam in another mock exam. You need to be doing that overall review of the topics, getting everything fresh in your minds, remembering formulas. There are a lot of them that you need to know across all these other topics. So mock exams would not be the best use of time with only 1 or 2 days before your actual exam. Another thing that we encourage you all to do in this final couple of days is to understand how you're going to arrive at the test center for your actual exam. Will you plan to take a taxi there or an Uber, or are you planning to drive yourself that day? If so, where are you going to park? Have you thought about that? How long is it going to take you to arrive at that hour that you need to go there for the test? Make sure that you give yourself some extra time that day. You don't want the added stress of worrying that you might arrive late to your exam on the actual test day. So get there early. Get there early so that that's not a consideration when getting yourself to the actual exam center. The other thing that we would encourage you to do is to organize your identification and your calculators a couple of days before the exam. Don't wait until the night before to go and find your passport. Don't wait until the night before to try to find the extra batteries for your calculator. Get all of that done a couple of days before. Get the passport set aside. Just give it a quick check. Make sure the identification, is valid still. It should be, of course, if you had registered for the exam with it. In terms of the calculators, we encourage students to bring a backup. If you have a second calculator, that's awesome. Sometimes students don't. If you do not have a second calculator, then we would encourage you all to bring a backup battery. and also to make sure that you've checked to make sure that the backup works. So for one reason, to make sure it actually would work if you needed it, but also to make sure you understand how to change the battery quickly. You might even need a little tool to open up the back of your calculator so that you can actually swap out the batteries. And if that's the case, then you need to bring that tool with you to the exam so that you can replace the battery if needed. All of this should be done a couple days before. All of this should be set aside so that you're not scrambling the night before to find the backup battery or the tool to open the back of the calculator to replace the battery. All this, again, should be done so that you're not worried about it the night before you actually have to go and take the test. Now, what should you expect on exam day? Well, again, there's going to be a lot of students, depending on where you are in the world, depending on which test center that you've chosen, there could be a lot of students that are also going to take the exam that day. So you want to arrive early for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want that stress of worrying as you make your way to the exam center that you're going to be late, but also you want to get there and get yourself checked in and get yourself situated without having to worry about waiting in a line for behind other candidates that have arrived before you. So just get there early. Get there 30 minutes before, plan for that. And then you've at least removed the stress associated with getting yourself there on time. Focus on what you can control. The unexpected may happen, and you got to be okay with that. I'll give you an example. I live in São Paulo, Brazil. I'm from the United States, but I've been living here in Brazil for a number of years now, and I've been doing CFA prep for many, many years. Here in Brazil, we've had some issues with the test centers in the past. I'll give one more recent example. This happened 2 or 3 years ago. When students were taking the exam, the power went out at the test center. And so all the lights went out, all the computer terminals turned off, and those students needed to just sit in their little cubicles at their computer terminals and wait and hope that the power would come back on and that their progress would not have been lost during this power outage. At least that's what I think the more well-prepared ones were hoping for. I think maybe an unprepared student maybe was hoping for this all to be over. But the point is, they couldn't control that. Eventually, the power did come back on. I think those students had to wait nearly 1 hour in silence in that test center, in the actual computer terminal or in front of their terminal. And then when the power did come back on, they were able to continue. So the clocks basically paused, and the amount of time that they had remaining in the session was accurately marked. So they were able to continue with the remainder of the session and go forward, with submitting their tests, and all hopefully worked out for them. But imagine the stress. You study for months and months, and all of a sudden the power's out, and you don't know if the exam is going to be voided, and you might have to come back again at a different time, maybe even a different cycle if it wouldn't be possible to fit you in during that particular window. But again, nothing that those students were able to control at the time, so they needed to just deal with it, and they did, and it worked out for them in that particular moment. But my point of this story is that you can only control what you can control. So you can prepare yourselves as best as you can over these final days. You can arrive early. You can make sure that everything was organized well in advance in terms of your identification and your calculator and whatnot. And that's all. That's basically all you can do. And then you go and you do your best, and that's it. So this is what I would suggest. Get into that type of a mindset. Focus on what you can control and don't worry about the rest. Have a test-taking strategy. This is something that you could have maybe implemented during your mock exams, but we encourage you all to think about a test-taking strategy where you can focus on maybe one topic at a time, as opposed to going through in the random order that they present the questions. By the way, for the session 1, all the ethics questions will be grouped together at that start. And then the other topics in session 1 would include quantitative methods, economics, financial statements, and corporate issuers. Those can get mixed together. And then later you'll have the remaining topics grouped together in the second session. But again, all mixed together. So you might feel it's better for you to do all the FSA questions in a group. So that's going to require you to skip around and answer just those questions, or you might find that it's better just to go in order of the questions in terms of how they were presented to you. So, but have a strategy. Already know what your plan is as you enter into the test center and start one of those sessions. One session of the exam or one set of the questions from one of the topic areas could appear to be more difficult than another or than others. Realize that that is normal. Realize that that sensation that you're feeling in terms of this being more difficult than that is not uncommon. Now, what you might sense to be more difficult than another topic could differ from one candidate to the other, but just don't worry about that. You just realize that not everything's going to be, in your opinion at least, of equal level of difficulty. So be aware and just kind of roll with it on the actual exam. It's very normal to feel stress in this environment. It's totally normal. And if you're really feeling overwhelmed, take a pause for 30 seconds or a minute, take that mental break, take a couple of deep breaths, maybe close your eyes and do a quick meditation for, not for very long because you have a time constraint here with the test, but maybe for a minute or so, just put down the calculator, just take a moment, and then take a couple of deep breaths and continue on if you feel like you need to do that. Some other things just to be aware of. The CFA Institute has a very strict policy about the responsibility of candidates and members as it relates to the exam. Make sure that you are not discussing the exam with other candidates. So that could be, before or even between the sessions, particularly between the sessions as you have already gone through the session one and will have some opinion as to how you performed on session one and what you encountered on session one. Don't go talking to other candidates about it. Realize that, for level one, for example, the pass rates are often in the low 40s. So less than half of the candidates are passing this exam. So your neighbor, the likelihood is, your neighbor at the test in the computer terminal next to you, let's say, the likelihood is that person is not going to pass. There's less than 50% chance of passing. So if you just selected a random person from a group of candidates, the likelihood is that person's not going to pass. You don't want to be talking to these people during the break in between session one and session two. You do not want the added stress of hearing how frustrated a candidate might be or how unfair the exam is in the eyes of that particular candidate, or how hard it is and how bad they're doing. Again, maybe the candidate won't say those things, but a lot of candidates do talk that way, and you just want to avoid those types of conversations. Focus on, like we had talked about before, what you can control. And what some other guy did in terms of his or her preparation doesn't matter to you at all. You just focus on what you can do and do the best that you can based on all the months of prep that you've put into this. Also realize you're not going to get every question correct, and you don't need to. In school, you might be frustrated with an exam that you're taking where, 3 out of the 10 questions, let's say, you're getting incorrect. You're clueless about, 2 or 3 questions out of a set of 10. Here, that's going to be enough to pass. If you're getting 7 out of 10 correct, more or less, and getting approximately a 70% score, you're moving on to level 2. So realize that there are going to be topics on this exam, questions that are derived from LOSs that maybe you're not as comfortable with. You have some space to make some mistakes and still move forward and pass and go on to the next level. So like we had said, and we'll say it one more time, stay positive, stay focused on what you can control. Realize you don't have to be perfect. You've put a lot of hard work into this exam preparation, and now is your moment to show what you've been doing over these last months. So just focus on you, focus on what you can control, stay in the moment, stay positive, and the best of luck to you all on your level 1 exams.